Okay, so good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and to all of the people that came, and thank you very much for coming to hear us talking about housing in Germany. My name is Tal Gibish. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder of Gibish Consulting, and we are a boutique relocation agency in headquarters in Berlin, but we work all over Germany. We provide services of relocation prep before you move to Germany even, also help organizing your residence permits, and so on and so forth. And we have also new relocation packages coming very soon by the end of the month. And you can follow in the website and our social media. And today I'm gonna introduce Maris, who is our home expert. And she's going to tell you a little bit about herself, and then we continue from there. So, Maris, please.
Quickly unmute. Hello to everyone, irrespective of whether you have evening, daytime, or still the morning. Greetings from Berlin. So I am a home search agent in Berlin. I've been working on this field for intensively for 3 years now, but my passion to regarding apartments, architecture, all related stuff goes way back, more than that. In any case, for the last 3 years, I have been working increasingly on both fields that we will cover today, like the relocation, the home search field in general in Germany. Divides basically into two segments. It's the furnished and the unfurnished segment. We will touch upon the differences and also the commonalities a bit more in more detail today. So I'm definitely experienced in both fields, and even maybe just to mention, I'm getting also more and more into the purchase and selling part of real estate. But of course, for the today's purposes, we are talking mostly and basically only about rentals. So again, furnished, unfurnished. And I can also already tell you that I have had basically clients from all over the world. So it's European based or outside of Europe. It doesn't really matter. The topics we will cover today, they apply to everyone. And basically, I am here for whatever questions you might have. Also, after the recording today, we will be in touch and accessible to you. And of course, it would be even more of my pleasure to meet one or the other of you to help you find your new home in Berlin or even elsewhere in Germany. So basically, especially when we come to the furnished segment, we are offering our services also outside of Berlin, Germany wide. Looking forward to the discussion. Tal, back to
Okay,
you.
so let's just dive in, I would say. So, today, basically, what we're going to talk about is housing, the renting market. We're going to talk about basic terms. And because this is what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about the differences between short-term and long-term rental processes, including documents, what documents do you need, how to present your application, kind of like tips to help you with this. Understanding I really hate this word, Mietschuldenfreiheitsbescheinigung, right? I said it right?
Absolutely. It is,
Thank you.
it's just always so funny how I think it's one of the most challenging German words, and it is so important for all the newcomers. So it's the best way to scare off people who are new or trying to get to the German rental market. But don't worry, we are here to help you cope with this document as
Yes.
well as all the rest. So it's basically Mietschuldenfreiheitsbescheinigung.
Let's just wait and talk about the documents, and
Let's do
then we're
that.
going to talk about the common scams and how to avoid them. And we leave some room for questions, the last 20 minutes or maybe even more if we have. So write all your questions in the chat, and then we can answer whatever you have. And we also received questions ahead from people who already said they're not going to be here. They're not available, so they asked to ask the questions, so they would hear the answers in the recording. So let's start with Anmeldung. This is the most important term, I think, that we're going to have. Anmeldung is registration as a resident of Germany. When you when you move to Germany, you have to register yourself as a resident. And whether you have EU citizenship or not, you have to register. There are forms for that, and you have to do this either in Bürgeramt, which is citizens office, right? In different cities, it's called different name, Bürgeramt, Bürgerbüro. And in some cities, you have to do your Anmeldung, your registration, in the immigration office and not in the Bürgeramt or Bürgerbüro. So this is something that is really, really important. Of course, we have, maybe you take the Warmmiete and Kaltmiete, the explanation.
Okay, back online. Warmmiete or Warmmiete is basically is the final amount, the total amount, including the utilities. Especially for now, I also have to explain again the difference between the furnished and unfurnished accommodation. So in furnished segment, basically the warm miete, the warm rent, is the only amount that will be disclosed to you. This is the only amount that is relevant to you, because in furnished segment, the rent includes already its fixed sum. It includes the utilities, plus typically also the electricity and internet are usually all covered in the warm rent, the final total rent. When we come to the unfurnished segment, then it's the rent is divided into two parts. So it's basically the ground rent, it's the cold rent. This is the rent without any utilities. So that is why we say cold. And then the warm rent would be the cold rent plus the costs for the cost for heating and water consumption, and also including the warm water, of course. But with unfurnished accommodation, it is very important to bear in mind that if in the warm rent, electricity and internet are not included. So the warm rent covers all the utilities, whereas for the electricity and internet providers, you would have to conclude separate agreements on top. And this is basically not the landlord's issue, or even a thing that the landlord will be able to help you with. This is something that you would have to do by yourself. And again, for the furnished accommodation, there is no need to worry basically about any of the utilities and providers. So this is the main difference between the cold rent and the warm rent. I hope.
And of course, we have the caution, which is the deposit.
Should I say something about deposit?
Yes, please.
Again, deposit is also a little bit different when it comes to the furnished or unfurnished accommodation. So as a standard rule for furnished accommodation, the deposit is usually 2 times the rent. But then it's the warm rent, basically the only amount that you have to pay monthly, the whole rent, times 2 is the deposit. For unfurnished accommodation, it is a little bit different. So it is only the cold rent, the basic rent, but times 3. So it's 3 times the rent, but the rent without utilities. So these are the main differences. Of course, there are some exceptional cases where furnished accommodation also has 3 times the rent as deposit, but also it can be rarely, though, one-time rent. But as a rule, it's usually 2 times for furnished and 3 times for unfurnished. And of course, another very important thing for you to know as newcomers, in both cases, for furnished as well as unfurnished segment, it is very important to have the caution, the deposit paid before you get the keys even. So before the handover appointment of the apartment, you would have to pay the deposit already to the landlord. However, there is again one exception when it comes to unfurnished accommodation. It is usually possible to negotiate the payment of deposit as 3 installments. So during the first 3 months of your rental relationship, you could pay the deposit as 3 equal installments. For furnished accommodation, I personally don't know of any such exceptions. In my experience, it is always the full deposit has to have arrived on the landlord's account before they will give you the keys to the apartment. So that's it for now.
Good. So you mentioned the handover meeting. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
Of course. So if you rent an apartment, so the first things, the process usually is the following. You, for the furnished accommodation, you can also book the apartment online without seeing the apartment before. But for unfurnished accommodation, this is not possible. You would always have to view the apartment in person before you can proceed with the rental agreement. This is also for legal reasons, so that you could basically not complain later after entering the apartment that there is something you were not aware of, and so the landlord basically protects themselves against any legal complaints. That is why for unfurnished accommodation you have to be present, for furnished accommodation not. Anyways, after booking the apartment, also either with viewing, without viewing, after saying, I want this apartment, and submitting your application documents, which we will also discuss in like shortly. After submitting the application documents and after getting the approval from the landlord that they would like to have you as their next tenants, you would get your rental agreement. The rental agreement will be then signed first by you. Then you will send the agreement back to either the property manager or directly to the landlord, who will then also countersign the agreement. Only then the agreement is fully in force, and legally also this gives you the foundation or the legal protection to now make the payments. The payments, the account details for the payments are usually included in the rental agreement. It is often either a separate account for deposit and for rent, or sometimes it's the same account. But it is definitely important not to make any payments before you have received the countersigned rental agreement. So after making the first payments, which I mentioned is the deposit and the first month's rent. These are the two payments that are required before the other side, the landlord or the property manager, will schedule a handover appointment for you. So you make the payments, and then you were giving a handover appointment. Usually it is either the first of the month or in the middle of the month. Sometimes it doesn't even matter. Some landlords, some providers are so flexible, you can move in basically on any day of the month. In any case, for the handover appointment, then it is again very important that you will be here already in person, and then you will go and meet either the property manager or the landlord. If you would like to have us support you, then we would also be present at the appointment to help you fill out the handover protocol. There are things that have to be kept in mind when giving the apartment over to you, that all the meter devices, all the checks and balances are in place, and some specific things to look out for. But basically, it is just the appointment for giving over to you the apartment as well as the keys, and signing the protocol about the quality, about the situation of the apartment. And again, after you are moving out of the same apartment, there will be a handover appointment again, together with a new protocol, basically seeing if the first protocol matches the final one and there are no big discrepancies and the apartment is in good, as basically in the same condition as you received it.
Do you recommend to take photos or videos at in the handover?
Yes, it is very common to take pictures or even make a video of the condition of the apartment. Especially some apartments, of course, have been used already for several years by previous tenants, and there are clear marks of usage. So it always is advisable to take pictures of any maybe damage or anything, some scratches on the walls or something similar, and also send the proof to the property manager or to the landlord, maybe within 24 to 48 hours, just to document the situation of the apartment, so that after you move out, nobody could basically say that these marks or damage was caused by you. So the landlords, property manager are actually encouraging even for you to take this kind of proof and keep it also until the moving out time.
Let's talk duration. Short-term apartment is 3 to 12 months, right? And what does it mean, long-term apartment?
Long-term apartment basically means there are different options, of course, but as a standard, there are, as Tal just mentioned, there are limited contracts, usually furnished accommodation, which is by law. Um, Basically, maximum duration is 12 months. There are some cases where you can discuss with the landlord, or when the landlord has from the beginning said that I have a very fixed term of 2 years or maybe even 3 years for my furnished accommodation. After that, I will use the apartment myself, basically. Then it is possible to have furnished accommodation for more than 12 months. But this is more as an exception than a rule. So as a rule, it is limited to 12 months. When we come to unfurnished accommodation, then the rule is actually unlimited duration. It is then a permanent rental agreement with no end date. So it is basically up to you to give notice once you decide, now I want to move out. Typically, as a rule, you have 3 months notice period, and you would have to notify the landlord in 3 months time, I'm leaving the apartment. Otherwise, the landlord would basically be unable to terminate the agreement unless there is a cause, like not paying the rent in time or something like this. But if there is no cause for the landlord to terminate, then you are basically protected. You can stay in the apartment as long as you wish. And this is also one of the reasons why these apartments are very challenging to find often, and the competition is the toughest because everybody would like to have an unlimited contract. But this is the typical case for unfurnished accommodation. And again, as an exception, there is also possibility that the landlord informs you right from the beginning that it is an unfurnished accommodation, but still in 3 years, 5 years time, I am planning to use the apartment myself. And this is why the rental contract will have a fixed end date. But again, this is more of an exception than a rule.
And then we talked about challenging. So it was also asked here, but how do people know if they have chances? Is it possible to know what the landlord wants? Who wants to be the tenant when we're not, also we're talking about furnished and unfurnished, but I think that's the main issue also that's the main issue with unfurnished, because you just don't know.
True, true. But based on my experience, I can already give some estimations and evaluate your success chances, I think, pretty well. What I can tell already for the furnished segment, again, I'll start with this. It is, of course, easier to get the apartments because often, as I said, you can book them online. You don't even have to be yet registered in Berlin or Germany at all. Basically, the main application documents are also not as challenging. It is basically your ID, like a passport copy, and your employment contract. So it would, of course, be very helpful if you would have already an employment contract with the German company, German provider, but it doesn't have to be. You can still be employed abroad, but you would have to show basically your employment contract either in German or English. English is also very fine, showing your salary. And if this is not enough, sometimes if the salary is a little bit on the lower end, you can also add maybe a report of your savings account, show some bank balance in addition to the employment proof. And for the furnished segment, this often is also enough. In case you bring any pets with you, they would also like to see, of course, the insurance, like a pet liability insurance. But again, this is something the landlords are quite flexible about. So in my experience, at least, you can also arrive already in the apartment and just follow up with the proof of insurance in the next couple of weeks. That works also very well. When we come to the unfurnished segment, the application documents are much more challenging. And here again, the success chances depend a lot on the application documents. And here the salary or the income is much more important because we have something, basically an unwritten rule, but it is so elaborate in the practice that there is no way around it. So the rule is basically a 30 to 40% rule. It used to be 30%, but since the rents have increased so much in the past 5 to 7 years, I would say, like especially in the last 5 years, then the landlords are also more and more flexible, and we call it now a little bit more like a 40% rule. So it is important for you to know that basically the warm rent, the final rent, including utilities, it shouldn't exceed more than 40% of your net income. So net income is the income after you have paid the taxes. So the income that you derive every month. So the rent shouldn't make up more than 40% of the income. If you already exceed this limit, you can still apply for apartments, but in my experience, at least your chances won't be very, very good because the competition, as I said, is also very high. And the numbers, in the end of the day, it's basically a numbers game. And of course, for the application documents, Tal, should I go into a bit more detail?
I just want to say that it's very interesting before we go to the documents. It's very interesting what you said about the net, the 30-40% from the net income, because the immigration office often looks at the brutto income, and then the landlords looks at, I guess that's kind of like the balance that they make on your brutto income and net income. But that we talked about employment, what freelancers and self-employed can do. What kind of stand out, as someone wrote here, how can they stand out to the landlord?
To be really honest, this is the most challenging client base for me, at least until now. I must say that it is definitely more difficult for freelancers to beat the competition than for the employees, for the regular employees. That I must say that the market is clearly skewed towards the employees. However, there are still chances to get apartments also for freelancers. But I must say the best chances, of course, are for freelancers who are already living in Germany, who can show that they have already paid their taxes, at least for the last year, or who are at least have already a tax accountant in Germany helping them with the tax payments, so that the tax accountant can also provide you with the proof of the estimated revenue. So they have a specific form to fill out and then show about your, for I think for the next year, basically what what they assume you would earn as a freelancer. But very often, as far as I understand, this document is based on the tax payments of the last three, at least 6 months, I think is advisable to have already paid the taxes here. So these are the main documents that only your tax advisor can issue. And maybe Tal, I don't know if you have experience, but with foreign freelancers who are still earning their income only from abroad, I unfortunately haven't had many cases like this before.
Well, I had, yes, and it's pretty much how you presented the storytelling. It usually helps not only with the furnished apartments, but also with the long-term apartments to show the savings that you have, to show that you had a steady income with either tax, I'm talking about, immigrants. So when you show that you have a steady income and you have enough money to ensure that even if you're not going to have an income in the next few months or in a few months during the year, so then it wouldn't be a problem to pay the rent. Um, Again, it's a storytelling and how you do this, but I think that it is possible that in any budget there are challenges. Like we have this case right now of a couple that own a company, and their budget is really, I would say, really high. And it's also challenging because they have pets and they have kids, teenagers. So some aspects are more challenging than the other. It doesn't matter if you're a freelancer or not, I would say.
For, sorry for not being clear about this. For furnished accommodation, I don't see any obstacles. Of course, if you're a freelancer, even abroad, we can still prove your income and through the savings accounts or just bank reports. That won't be an issue at all. What I meant is basically on the unfurnished segment, that here the competition is a little bit tougher. But again, as you mentioned, company owners, I have also had several clients now who are owning their own company abroad, like maybe in Israel. Then it is also very helpful to have the respective proof from the origin, the country of origin. If they have a proof of the let's say how it's called, corporate registry, that this family or these people are the owners of the company, and they are also have their tax declaration from the previous year, then that is already very helpful. I think that the hardest part is really with the freelancers who are just by them working for themselves by themselves, and who don't have a good proof of a tax declaration in the form of a tax declaration. Then we have a bit of a more challenge. But as company owners or anyone who has sufficient proof from their tax accountant, even if the tax accountant is not a German, even if he's abroad, basically any proof you can give us in English would be very helpful, and then we would have to, of course, add a little bit of storytelling, and it's still all is doable, all is figure outable.
So let's talk about documents. Now, we talked about short term, long term. Let's talk about documents. And I would start, if you don't mind, with the shufa, which is the easiest to pronounce. Uh, and shufa, I think that's basically on the name of a commercial company that's called Shufa. And there are providers, that's the original, I think. And they provide the credit history. So the Shufa is basically shows if you have debts, if you have any kind of Um, anything that you were late with paying the rent and someone registered there, things from the bank, that you're clear from, that you have salary, all this information. So this is the shufa. Usually better to get it after 3 months of employment of some kind, staying in Germany. Obviously, it's possible to get it before, and then you get clean shufa, which is good or bad. It depends on the landlord, right?
Well, I would say again, Shufa, for for the topic of Shufa, it is again important to distinguish between the furnished and unfurnished segments. For the furnished accommodation, I haven't needed a Shufa till now. So far, all my customers have been able to get an apartment even without a Shufa. And this is the strategy that we always recommend to our customers is to the first year, it doesn't have to be a year, but at least 6 months, 6 months to 12 months, start with your furnished accommodation, and then you will have enough time to gather all the documents, to get the pay slips. If they are German, pay slips, even better. If you need to pay taxes as a freelancer, then you will already be able to show some kind of a proof and get an estimate also for the near future. You would also have your bank account opened, you would have your registration, the Anmeldung, and this brings you also then a Schufa. And if you don't have any credit issues, it will basically always be a clean Schufa. Sometimes you are so fresh and new here, you don't have basically no Schufa or like a credit score at all. So because just nothing has happened in your financial recordings here, and a Schufa without basically a neutral Schufa is also fine. It's also fine. Basically, as far as I can tell, the landlords only want to see that your credit score isn't negative, but there are no debt issues. So positive Schufa is fine, neutral is also good, but in any case, being here for already a couple of months before you start your long-term apartment search is helpful for the paperwork.
Let's talk about the other documents, for example, payslips. But before we go through the other documents, I want to make sure that everybody understand, for long-term apartment, for the unfurnished ones, please do not send your documents before you see the apartment. It's very, very important. It's base of identity theft, and it's not very pleasant if it turned out to be a scam, which in the main website for long-term apartments, the Immobilien Scout 24, that's very big base of scams. So we're going to talk about scams in scams in a few minutes, but definitely not to send any money, any documents before you see the apartment, that it exists, the person exists, all of this. So we have 3 last payslips, right? In addition to the shufa.
Should I,
And yes,
should I mention all of those?
and your document that I'm not repeating
Your
this one.
favorite, your
Yes.
favorite. Okay, so we talked about Schufa, the credit score report. Then we have the pay slips, right? The most important thing is basically your proof of income. For the pay slips, 3 last months are the most important. Of course, it is possible because the standard trial period in Germany is usually 6 months. So it is very possible that the landlord will, in addition to your free payslips, will also ask to see your employment contract. So this is not a red flag or anything. It is just they want to usually see that you are no longer on a trial period. Trial period can also be shorter than 6 months. Some contracts don't have a trial period at all. So for the very strict landlords, of course, it is ideal in case you have a 6 month trial period that you already wait this period out before applying for the long-term apartment, so that you can show trial period has been successfully completed. But also, even if there is just one more month to go, like you're 5 months into the trial period, I have had positive experience also in such cases. Just so you know, sometimes the payslips are not enough, but for the main usually they are. So in addition to the like passport copy, ID, Schufa, payslips, proof of income. If you don't have payslips or employment contract, then again, as mentioned, you can get from the tax accountant respective proof as a freelancer, or then as a company owner. There are also other documents that we can discuss. And then the favorite document of everybody, because of the very nice word, the name of the document, Mietschuldenfreiheitsbescheinigung again. It's basically, it has a very tricky, horrible name, very long, complicated. Nobody knows how to pronounce it, but it's just a one-page confirmation from your current landlord that you don't have any rental debt. So it is a very, very easy form for the landlord to fill out. Just make an X into the right box and tick the box, no debt, and sign it. But if you come from abroad, again, for furnished accommodation, this document is not relevant. It is not needed. It is only important for the unfurnished segment. So the landlord, usually of the furnished accommodation, the first accommodation where you're staying for the beginning of your time in Germany, they know, of course, what this document is, and they are happy to issue it. And they will just show this person has been living at this address for how many months and always paid their rent in time. And you will add this one-page document to your application documents, and the long-term apartment owner will know there won't likely be any issues with your rental payments also in the future. So these are the four basic documents. Of course, in addition, if you have pets, if you have kids, there might be additional things we can add. But these are always, there is always a solution to those. So the first four are the mandatory ones. There are always optional additional documents that we can add in order to strengthen your search profile. But basically, just you will have to keep in mind the four. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, of course, the fifth mandatory one is in case you are an immigrant with a requirement to apply for a residence permit. This is something that Tal is the biggest expert on, so she can tell you all about it. But if your visa is basically expiring in a couple of months, you won't be very attractive for the landlords unless you have already applied for the residence permit and they know that you are um, legally able to stay in Germany for the next couple of years. Then it's no issue for your competition.
I would also recommend to add for both short and long term liability insurance, personal liability insurance, so the landlord would know that his home is safe. So this is something, and because we want to give a little bit of time for questions, and we already covered a lot, let's talk in short about scams. What are the common scams, and how to avoid them? You start
Okay.
with one, I'll go with another, and then
Yeah, we can
share experiences.
share some experience here. I think you briefly already very helpfully mentioned that sending out any application documents before you have viewed, we are talking about the unfurnished segment now. In furnished segment, there are a little bit different scams, but I will start now with the unfurnished one because they are more common in this segment. Because again, the scammers also know where the competition is the toughest, and they try to target there where people are more yeah, desperate, let's say honestly, in Berlin at least. So first thing is not sending your personal information before you have met anybody on site, and cannot even verify if this apartment actually exists. Is this landlord even serious or not? So the data protection is one issue. Second, of course, is the big red flag anytime after you have requested an apartment, you have requested a viewing appointment, and they start replying to you, we would be very, very happy to give you an appointment, but the landlord or the owner is living abroad, is traveling abroad, is not available at the moment. We are sending somebody to give you the keys. That's no issue, but please make some kind of a payment. It can also be a tiny payment, just for the viewing appointment, or just for somebody to bring you the keys. Any payments at all before any viewings are definitely a big scam. There is no legal explanation for that. And even the next step after the viewing, again, this is what I mentioned, why I mentioned it before: never make payments before you receive a countersigned rental agreement, because up until then, after you have viewed the apartment, signed the agreement, gotten the signed agreement back, I don't honestly believe any payments beforehand are a good idea. This can always go wrong.
Well, another payment that I actually, well, one of my clients was asked to pay is seriousness fee to
Ah,
prove that he's serious and that he wants the apartment for 500 euros.
mm,
So that's completely crazy. And I also had with a client, the landlord lives abroad, and that's okay, no problem. The apartment is ours, we have the key, and that was a very, very, very smart scam, I would say, because only in the Anmeldung we understood the Anmeldung appointment, we understood that he's not the owner of the apartment. And so everything looked like very, very nice. So sometimes it's hard to spot, but this is something that, can be red flag. I think that also the first red flag should be if the photos are beautiful and the price is, and it's a great area, and but the price is suspiciously low. That's like a major red flag. I heard this, and but or they're very for immigrants, newcomers. Yes, we want for long-term apartment. I had that also already this year. um, we want you because you're from the US. We want you because you're from Hungary. So many other that we want to encourage newcomers, and it sounds so welcoming and nice, and you're so excited that you're gonna get a long-term apartment, and then you completely forget that why would they want someone for, I know it sounds horrible, but why would they want someone for long term if they're not in the country yet, or they're from specific nationality? Always a red flag in my eyes. And one thing that we didn't mention in the long term, so before we go to the next scam, that not all long term apartments come in with a kitchen built in. This is very important. You have to make sure, if you want a kitchen, if you want to buy a kitchen that would suit the apartment, your needs, your desires, that's okay. So you don't have to take an apartment or to search for an apartment with a kitchen built in, which actually makes the search easier if you search with no kitchen, right?
sure.
But this is a thing in Germany.
And and this, of course, it is a very, very important point that you raised here. And this doesn't, I mean, I'm trying to explain now. This doesn't have to be a scam, but it is something to be prepared for. That people who have rented the apartment before you, they rented the apartment maybe without a kitchen. So this happens often, that they took the apartment. It was cheaper to get it without kitchen. There was less competition, and then they invested in a kitchen. Sometimes it's just an standard IKEA kitchen. Sometimes it's much more fancy, and they are allowed to basically sell the kitchen to the next tenant after they move out. So they would ask basically the next tenant to it's called Abstand. I don't even know how to translate it best. It's basically a remuneration, or like compensation for the kitchen, and sometimes some, I don't know, built-in closets can be also part of it. But just bear in mind, I know that it is quite common that some tenants try to use this option in order to get more money from the next tenant as is actually reasonable. So as a principle, asking for a compensation for your investment into the furniture, into the equipment, into the electronics is not illegal, but it is still a scam if they ask, I don't know, twice the price. So it should still be reasonable that it's the price minus the, how it's called, yeah, the consumption or the time that it was already used by the previous tenant. So it should make sense, the amount that they ask you. But again, this is more, it's not a rule, it's more of an exception, but it is quite common, just so you can be prepared that this by itself doesn't mean that the landlord is not serious or the apartment is not serious. It just has to be reasonable on both ends.
Yeah, I think that the next 10 minutes we dedicate to questions. So if you have, please drop them in the chat. And one question that was asked here, and I feel that we need to give it a little bit more of an answer to stand out for newcomers that are, let's say, 3-6 months already in Germany. How should they design the application to stand out? What do you think about that?
So usually what I always assist my customers also with preparing their application portfolio. Um, as I mentioned, the mandatory documents, they all have to be present. So they have to be present, and it is always nice to have optional, not really, yeah, it's half optional, half mandatory. What Tal mentioned is the liability insurance. This is definitely strengthens your portfolio if you add the insurance proof. And of course, it is always, I think, has been positively received to have a nice cover letter from just describing your background a little bit. If a nice picture is something that you would be willing to provide on the cover letter, that would also be very, very helpful, especially even if you have pets or kids. This as you
Or
know, maybe,
both?
or both. Pets aren't always very, very warmly received. So this is also part of a little bit of a storytelling to have a nice picture of your pet. This seems to help a lot. Um, and of course, also the formatting itself, like for technical reasons, I have noticed if you have all documents as one PDF file, everything gathered into one file, one attachment, it seems to be also much more welcomed than having like 6, 7, 8 files in a row, and then the landlord has to click or download through all of those.
Yeah.
So these are these tiny tweaks that we can definitely work on.
And to that, I have to, add that if you send one attachment, one PDF, please compress, because no one would, not sure they would get it if it's a file of 30, 40 mega. Then it would be difficult for some emails to digest, some services. But also it's not nice for someone that takes, I know that today, computers can store a lot of, they have a lot of storage, but still it's not really nice for someone to get an email with 30 mega. So please compress. Another question that I was asking in advance was about the budget. Is a budget for a family of a single mom and 2 teenagers of 1,800 for unfurnished apartment for 3 rooms. Is that reasonable in a good neighborhood?
1800 1800 for 3 rooms. A lot depends on their flexibility regarding the location. It definitely won't be the most central area, I would say. but I think it's feasible. I mean, in case if you have 1,800 is the budget, then it means, right, that your income would have to be, but at least 5,500 net, right?
Yeah.
Around 5,500, 5,500 net. If the income matches the budget, then I don't see any problems. Why not? So for 1,800, I can make it happen. And especially, I mean, the kids, I don't know the ages, their ages, but for unfurnished accommodation, that is what I mentioned, that the optional proof that we can add to your application documents would also be child support. For example, if you're already living in Germany and your kids are underage, you are eligible for child support for every child, and this support also counts towards your income. So it is definitely always very helpful to add those additional benefits as well in order to show your financial stability.
We have a question here from a US citizen who just got his freelance visa today, residence permit.
Congratulations.
And he has a US-based company since 2022, and he can prove the tax records for that. And would it be a good idea to look at the long-term apartments now if he can prove he can use that for proof of finance instead of another short-term apartment, and then having the new German company that he wants to establish without much history?
So he's already living in Germany,
Yes,
right?
yes.
This is, oh, yeah, it's a tricky question. I mean, obviously, in such cases, it is very hard to guarantee anything. We can definitely give it a try. I assume from the States, he would be able to show the company revenue, let's say for the whole 2024 and also how this year is going. Um, I would have to take a closer look at the documents for sure, but I don't see why not. I mean, we can give it a try just to maybe be prepared that in such a little bit more challenging cases, the search can take a bit longer. You might need a bit more viewings or more applications before we get a good positive response. But in general, I think a search takes about 2 months in general. It can go also with 1 month, but the more challenging cases I have had are around 3 months. So basically, anywhere between a month to 3 months is something that you should plan on, and I would, yeah, be happy to give it a try if yeah, if you're willing to as well.
Okay, so okay, you said Immobilien Scout is shady, or I understood wrong? It's not shady.
It's the best we have.
It's the only one, and it's not the only one. There's Immowelt and Immonet and others, but this is the biggest one. Just, you have to be careful with the scams. Child support you just mentioned, I will get right when I arrive after Anmeldung, or only after I start working. That's totally different story, and I think not really housing related. But I did get a question before, so about a couple that arrives to NRW in Northern Westphalian, and they arrive, one of them, they're going to come, they're going to start with short-term apartment, and then they want to search for a long-term apartment, and one of them would work and the other one not. Is it still valid and optional to search for a long-term apartment?
Basically, again, it's about the income. So I have, of course, I have clients where the husband or wife earns so well that the other partner doesn't have to work, or they have small kids, or they do something else. So basically, if the net income of the family, irrespective of who earns it, and including the child benefits or any benefits, if the net income is matches the rule, the 40%, 30-40% rule, then there are no obstacles for applying for unlimited. apartments.
Okay. Well, no, it was seriously, we we managed to cover a lot in such a short time. Um, what I recommend, if you want to be in contact with Maris, please contact us at the info email. I put it in the chat, and then we connect you to Maris. One more question. Let's see. It's the child support related because it will sum up on my income and I need to understand what salary I need to find and what budget to rent. So that's exactly what we said about the 30-40% rule. So this is something that should cover this. So if there are no, we'll take another question if you have, but if not, so we thank you very much for coming. I see we have no more questions. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much, Maris, for joining us.
Truly my
We have
pleasure.
one moment.
One more.
Okay,
We can
one more
make it.
question. Okay, let's take it. Yes, please. Let's wait for this one last
Okay,
question.
Okay.
let's do it on audio, so it will be faster.
Okay,
Sure.
go
Yes,
ahead.
let's go ahead, baby.
Hi, I have a question about Untermiete, a secondary rent. Is it legal in this way or another to be in secondary rent and then to stay for a long term, even if the first renter not staying in the apartment? Because I understood that's happening here a lot in Berlin.
It is actually a very good question. Yeah, we didn't cover this topic, so I'll try to be brief. But as a rule, I don't recommend my customers to take Untermiete contracts. I understand that sometimes they don't have a choice really, and sometimes it's just to bridge the gap between the different, maybe one rental contract already ends and you don't have the next one yet. So for a couple of months as a bridge, it is okay, it is fine. But as a long-term solution, I never recommend Untermiete for the following reasons. Firstly, it is very rarely that you are allowed to legally register in the apartment when you only have the Untermiete contract. Even if the main tenant somehow is able to give you the registration proof, I don't know. And in my experience, the Bürgeramt people, the caseworkers from the authorities, they are not willing to often register you there. And secondly, again, your question touched upon this. If the main tenant leaves earlier, this automatically would end your contract as well. So you are legally not protected in any way because your residency in the apartment depends completely on the main tenant. And the biggest problem that I see is that very often for the main tenants themselves, who are just interested in renting out their rooms or the whole flat, they don't even ask the owner, am I allowed to do so? Whereas in their own rental agreement, it is often stated clearly it is not allowed. Untermiete is not allowed, and they still do it. So it is like very hazy gray area. It's basically also a scam, not like directly, not always directly, but long term or indirectly. It is possible that if the landlords finds out that you are living there without any permission, they have the legal right to immediately terminate the contract with the main tenant, which again means that you would also be on the street basically overnight if the landlord wants so. So these are very. I don't want to put my customers in such a situation, even if it happens to be just a theoretical one. I can never like wholeheartedly recommend to do so.
And I
I
can
hope it
also
I hope it
add,
helps.
yeah, and he said that it's a lot, it's happening a lot in Berlin.
It
It's not
is
only in Berlin, it's
true.
all major cities and even not in major cities, it's everywhere. So, in Germany, we try to stay within the law. And then, yes, sublets are shady, definitely, if you want to register on the apartment, and that might be an obstacle. So we would end here, and thank you again.
I thank
And
you
it
all.
was very interesting. And again, if you want to contact Maurice, you are welcome to contact us at the info email. And have a great evening, day, or morning, whatever the time zone allows.
Thank you so much for your attention, and I would sincerely hope to meet you soon in Germany and to work with you. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.